Okay, hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This time hopefully the long-awaited next episode in the Land Rover rebuild. So we're going to look at the axles. I'm not sure if I'll get both of them into one episode, but we'll give it a try and see how we go. But I certainly have got a lot of now video footage from when I was building the axles, so this may either be a really long video or I might look at it and think no, I'll cut them into two. There's obviously, because of what happens in the front, there's a lot more work that goes to the front and a lot more footage of the front, so we'll spend quite a bit of time on that. This axle you'll be seeing is quite an early one. It would have come out of the factory in I think it's December 48 or January 49, I think. So it's actually quite an early one, and it is the tractor joint style. It was, as you'll note in some of the pictures, it's had some freewheeling hubs on it, which I removed. The reason I removed them is because the gearbox is a freewheeling system, that if you had these hubs on and you disconnect the front drive, you don't actually connect, all of the front is still working, right? The whole point in freewheeling hubs is when you're in two-wheel drive, you can disconnect the hubs as well, so it stops all of the drivetrain in the front of the car from moving around. But of course, because this was a permanent four-wheel drive system, it doesn't do anything at all, really. So kind of a bit of waste of time. So I took those off, and the tractor joints were filled with quite a thick grease, which if you've got a universal joint in there in the later cars, it's probably not so bad. This is again the information I've read and sort of just using a bit of possible common sense. So I've gone back to using the EP90 oil in there, so same stuff that's in the diff. And we've got to make sure all the seals are really good, which is one of the interesting things that we'll talk about a little bit later, because I've got a bit of a problem with the front far side axle at the moment, and I need to have an axle hub, and I need to take it apart and have a look. So I'm not sure if the oil is getting through into the bearings or not, but that's something that needs to investigate. But for now, we're going to dive in. We'll show you the axles as they came off the car, and then there's the going through the cleaning process. And yeah, we'll talk you through all the different bits and pieces. So hope you enjoy. So here we have the front axle as it had come out of the Land Rover. I haven't really done too much to it just yet. Here's the rear axle, an interesting colour, yes, not really sure. Didn't find anything underneath the red, so we left it as it is. Here's one of the freewheeling hubs. I can't remember what brand they were, but they came off and were sold. Here's another view of the other side. As you can see, it's been sitting for a while. Obviously, not too much love spent on this. Right, we've pulled the front axle apart, got the half shafts out, and so here's the hubs, and you can see the shortened drive shaft from the tractor joint out to the wheel. Right, here's the front axle again, so you can see the half shafts are out. Here's the diff. As you can see here, there's some slightly different colours of paint, but in the end, it all came off. Here's the rear axle, having been wire brushed down, which we did to start with. I ended up sanding it off. Here's the front axle, also been cleaned up, but like I said in the next images of the rear axle again, I ended up sending off to a media blaster because I didn't feel that the wire brush was doing enough of a job. So here we have all of the drive shafts or half shafts sitting up on the bench from the front and the back. Diffs are now out as well. Okay, here we have a number of the components of the front all cleaned up and getting ready for paint. Look at that pretty washing line, all perfect for painting lots and lots of bits. And here we have, so what I've used here is Buzzweld's Rust Encapsulator. This is the early version of the product. It's just another close-up. So this was put straight onto bare steel, and then over the top went CIO. I'll put links in the description below to the products here. There's, again, diffs coated up with Rust Encapsulator, and then lots of CIO put on over the top of that. Now, the casings here were media blasted, and I had someone else do this, and these as well were all done in a paint booth. So that whole lot there was done in a paint booth. I just thought it'd be a little bit easier and save some time, and the media blasting would have done a better job than I could have done with cleaning it up. So, getting ready to start putting things back together. We've got lots of good paint on. Oh, look at those lovely brand new. Just a bit of wax on them. Need a bit of clean, but lovely. Diff goes in first, obviously. Put in new gaskets. In this next section, I had recorded something, but unfortunately I've noticed through a number of these pieces of video that I had either the radio going on the background, which of course I can no longer now broadcast, but also my voice levels were quite low, so we're going to have to do some voiceovers for some of this. In this section, I was just actually looking at the half-dash shaft in and just wondering whether it had it upside down, and then just went over to the bench to have a look at the tractor joint to see if it was all nice and clean and ready to go in the car. Now we're just looking at a number of the hubs and splines, etc. for the tractor joints, and I was going through the parts that I'd had ordered and was noticing that I think I was probably missing a few bits. One of the bits I did order I found to be not quite as useful in the end, but we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Okay, here we've got one of the drive shafts in through the bearing, and we've got to put the collar on. So we've got a nice new collar, so I destroyed all the collars, taking them off, which was fine because these sit in the oil seal, so I wanted to make sure they were really good. So and then we'll be cleaning this up, obviously. Clean it up so we put the rest of it together. So here you can see the collar's on. We heated up the collar first to make it expand a little bit to get it on as much as possible, and then I had the old collar that had been pressed off, and that was quite handy as well because I don't want to be hitting this other one. I don't want to peen the edges or anyway, so I've dropped the old collar over the top and use that to something to hit, and just kept tapping it down until it was nice and in. One thing I did find with these things you have to be careful is as you're tapping it on, if the bearing's not tight, the whole shaft can start coming out through the bearing. So you've got to make sure there's something inside the ball joint there to hold that in place, or else you sort of think you've tapped it all the way down, you turn it around and it's quite sloppy. So just something to consider when you're knocking that into place. Unless of course you have got a proper press, again you still need to make sure something's up there supporting the half shaft so it doesn't fall out. Now putting in this copper bushing the top, again got to be very careful, making sure that the whole thing's supported. If you can press it in, you've got the right things underneath it, it'll be fine. But again, just got to be very careful you're not hitting anything and damaging either the ball or that copper bushing as you go through that process. Right, parts I've been waiting for, unfortunately longer than they should be, but anyway, they're here. So some nice new studs at the top of the swivel housing for the steering linkage. Put 3 in already. Just using the old nuts to tighten those on. I've got some new ones that will go on top of those. So cleaned up the surface here as well, and hopefully we'll be sticking that on there a little bit later on. Hope I've got all my information correct from the workshop manual about what I should do next, but yeah, another video coming in a short while. Okay, all measured up, got a number of shims in there, quite a few, got locking bars in place, more shims for the top. There's locking bars for the other side. I had 2 different types of locking bars actually, but these are the original ones from the parts manual, so we'll go with original. So yeah, shims for the top, I've evened those out. I started off with 2 0.01 inch in here based on the workshop manual, then put it on, measure the top, and then, as I said, split them up. But obviously they're not quite even, so put more in the bottom is what the workshop manual said. So that's all done. Now stick it all back on. I've put a lot of grease because obviously there's no gasket in here, and as I am planning on putting oil in this thing, not grease, I've greased up. I use the same grease I use on the gaskets, and I've greased up each. Just another quick note from the workshop manual. When putting the cone in, give it a good coat of oil, but the oil entry hole to get oil up into the mechanism while it's moving should be pointing backwards. So this is the front of the vehicle. So as I've got that in the back there, and just got to make sure these splines line up on the top arm. Right, it's all mounted on. Just sort of take a look at in the inside there. Show what it looks like. This is the older style with the kind of knuckle arrangement. It had gone to the bush on the top rather than the bearing, but according to the parts manual, it's really just a serial number thing. This is how it came out, so and everyone recommends it's better for steering. So that's what's going back in. So we'll stick in the other drive shaft and put in the stub axle in just a sec. Right, some interesting lessons learnt just doing the other side, other swivel housing. So this one here is I had to use a lot more shims on this side, so I'm thinking that maybe the measurement over there is not quite what I thought it was, and possibly because the longer steering arm, maybe I should have measured from the inside hole instead of the outside one. But we'll go back and check that. But as I said, a lot more shims here, and in the workshop manual it states put more in the bottom than the top. So I even them out but put slightly more in the bottom. Putting it back in, notice that the oil seal doesn't sit right, it's tighter at the bottom. Pulling it apart, notice that because it had so many shims in here, the bearing was actually touching the inside of the housing here. It wasn't sitting on the pin anymore, and so there's a bit of a gap there. So that would have definitely caused a bit of a problem. So I've moved one of the thicker shims out, and we've got good space in there now, and that will go on the top, and we'll put it back together. And then once that's back in, we'll double check the measurements, and if it's all good, I might have to go and put a few more shims over on that side. Anyway, getting there, I guess. I did buy some new castle nuts because, well, they're only cheap, so I thought I'd give them a go. But sure enough, even though it said there for a 48 axle, it's the wrong thread. So using the old ones, nothing really much wrong with them, to be fair. But still, it's just one of those things that are cheap enough, and I thought, you know, why not? But definitely got a new washer, because I think who knows what I did with the other one. Either threw it away or decided I didn't like it because it was wrong. So they're cheap as chips anyway. So one of the things I'm finding interesting is as I took this apart, the housing in here is the last person had used one-shot grease, and that's all good. Obviously it's something people do. In looking at it, and certainly looking at it all apart, I'd have to go back and show pics for people to see it, but the you know, this is more of the tractor joints, not the universal joint inside this one, and I just found there's a good amount of wear on some of them. Not too bad that I'm had to change parts, but you could see it's starting to wear, and I think probably because grease moves, and it goes hard over time, and if it's not, you know, if it's not being looked at, then it's not really working. So I'm going to go back to putting oil in them, which hopefully, you know, this is me just thinking out loud. By the way, I'm not reading workshop manuals, but obviously you've got the oil seal on the back, and you half fill this from oil. And the thing is that I'm expecting is this: the oil will run through the stub axle here and out through the end here, and then obviously back in here, and we've got oil seal on the back here, which sits up against that rim to stop the oil pouring out through there. And of course the good thing is that oil will seal these bearings, the hub bearings here. So anyway, just thought that's just me thinking out loud again at the moment, and keep track of what it is I'm doing. So going to put this back on, this axle back on. Don't know why, but I decided to buy the leather one for this. I bought rubber ones, and this is the first kind of leather one I bought. It was just to see the difference, I guess, see if there's anything better or worse than I've soaked them to soften them up before I put them on, as I've read other people do. And you know, the good thing is if they're no good, then it's not exactly a major to get them off and have them replaced. So anyway, we'll see how we go. Right, one for you, Colin. Okay, having to take some bits apart again, unfortunately. Go back a few steps. I put the anchor plates around the wrong way. Unfortunately noticed when putting the brakes on that they weren't sitting properly, and it didn't look right. So common sense prevailed. Checked a few things, and yes, so I've swapped the plates back around, but had to take a few things apart. One thing of interest, this side here, sorry, this hub here sits quite nicely back in. So just looking at the way that seal has formed itself quite nicely in there, compared to if I have a look at the other one, which is not sitting properly. You can see how that really hasn't, it's really catching and pushing. It's got a nice lip there that's really stopping the hub going on properly. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that. Might have to pop that out, and yeah, not quite sure yet. I have to have a look at that. Anyway, it needs a bit of work because this hub's not going on properly on this side. But anyway, anchor plates are now round the right way, on the right side. So I'll be trip over that, Michael. Alright, going to get on with it, do another short video soon. In this video we're just looking at the way I put the brake shoes on. Obviously there's a little retaining clip that goes on the bottom, so we'll put that on a little bit later. So certainly I put the left side on first because of the red spring at the top. And then the right hand side, what I found is attaching the springs while having the shoe out like this, and attaching the springs and then slowly pushing it round to the right and then clipping it in the cylinder at the top was probably the easiest way of doing it. Well, that's the way I found anyway. Some others may have another way of doing it, and please feel free to post in the comments below. But that all clipped in nicely, and then we put that little clip on the bottom, and the brakes were on. Here I just want to show you some differences I found. So I originally bought these leather oil seals for the front hubs there, and I wanted to give them a try because obviously leather seals have been used quite a lot in the old days, and certainly when you've soaked them full of oil, you know, when you first get them and they're quite dry, you're kind of wondering how this is going to work, but obviously you soak them in some oil overnight or for a few days and they soften up quite nicely. But certainly on one side, one of them was catching the lip, and just in a few moments here I'll show you. So So here on the stub axle, what you can see is how it steps up a little bit. So the first step, where I had my finger there now, that's where the bearing sits. And now up on this top bit, that's where the oil seal has to go. And what's happening, now whether it's the thickness of the oil seal and the placement of where the leather is and where it sits, as you can see, it's not quite pushing itself up on top of that lip, and a little bit of the leather material is sitting down on the edge. And then what happens is, of course, when you're trying to push on the hub, the bearing doesn't sit hard up, so you can't actually sit the hub in properly, and there's too much play in there. As you can see with the rubber seal, I've pushed that on now, how that pops up nice and easily. So yeah, unfortunately the leather ones didn't work for me, and we went to the rubber ones. Alright, there we go. So there's the rubber seal in there. As you can see, there's plenty of space for that to turn around. One thing I've noticed, if you accidentally push this in too far, it does squeeze up tight against the bearing and cause that not to move. So again, something to consider. It's almost like the rubber seal could do with a slightly deeper rim on this edge, so that it hits the bearing race before it goes any further. It's probably, I don't know, a good mil or two out. Right, I hope you enjoyed that ride through the rebuild of the axles. We're going to end the video there. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please press the like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care for now.